The wilderness of Washington state harbors secrets deeper than its canyons and older than its ancient trees. In May 2019, 16-year-old Ethan Miller vanished near Mount Rainier, swallowed whole by the vast, unforgiving landscape. Years blurred into a haunting silence, his disappearance a cold case chilling Sarah, his sister, to her core. Then, in late 2023, an impossible signal pulsed from a hidden volcanic cave, leading explorers to a startling discovery. Ethan's lost gear and a walkie-talkie, its battery astonishingly still active until April 2024. This wasn't just a boy lost. It was a miraculous survival, a desperate fight for life, followed by a second, baffling disappearance. What happened to Ethan Miller after he cheated death and walked out of that mountain, only to vanish again? The truth, if ever found, promises to be more terrifying than any wild beast. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are, and subscribe to our channel to receive new stories every day that will thrill your heart. I hope you enjoy the story. The story, a chilling tale of youth, nature's indifference, and a family's enduring agony, begins in the heart of May 2019. The air in the Miller household, usually thick with the comfortable hum of suburban life, now vibrated with a different kind of energy, the electric thrill of an impending adventure. Ethan Miller, a vibrant, boundless 16-year-old, his eyes sparkling with a mix of youthful bravado and genuine awe, was preparing for what he believed would be his greatest conquest yet. His backpack, a monstrous thing of olive green canvas and intricate straps, lay splayed open on his bedroom floor, disgorging a cascade of carefully chosen gear, a lightweight tent rolled tight, a coil of climbing rope, energy bars crammed into every available pocket, and most importantly, his beloved DSLR camera, its lens gleaming with the promise of capturing untamed beauty. Ethan wasn't just any teenager. He possessed an old soul drawn to the raw, unfiltered majesty of the natural world. Photography was his passion, a silent language through which he communicated with towering pines and rushing rivers. His chosen destination for this solo camping trip was not some idyllic, well-trodden park trail, but the imposing, ancient slopes of Mount Rainier in Washington, U.S. of the very name whispered of rugged challenge, of untamed wilderness, of a sleeping giant whose breath was the mist that often shrouded its snow-capped peak. He'd meticulously planned his route for weeks, poring over topographical maps spread across his desk like ancient scrolls, tracing faint lines with a determined finger. His intention was to delve deep, to find those untouched landscapes, to capture the raw essence of a wilderness few dared to explore. His older sister Sarah watched him with a complex tapestry of emotions. At 24, she was both his protector and his closest confidant, navigating the tricky balance between an older sibling's nagging concern and a friend's unwavering support. As Ethan cinched the last buckle on his pack, she leaned against the doorframe, a mug of steaming coffee clutched in her hands, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill that had begun to settle in her stomach. "You sure about this, Ev?" she asked, her voice tinged with a worry she tried, unsuccessfully, to mask. Rainier can be pretty unforgiving, even in May. Ethan just grinned, his excitement infectious. "Come on, Sarah. It's what I live for. Besides, I've got my comms, my GPS, and a good feeling. What could go wrong?" He waved off her concerns with the casual dismissiveness of youth, promising daily check-ins on his satellite radio, a sturdy, waterproof model he'd saved for months to buy. Sarah, despite her unease, mustered a smile, squeezing his shoulder. "Just be careful, okay? Call me when you get back, first thing." She watched him load his gear into his beat-up sedan, the rising sun catching the glint of his camera lens one last time. She had no way of knowing, no premonition. that this seemingly mundane farewell would become an agonizing, indelible memory. The last time her eyes would ever behold her brother for 5 long, desolate years. The initial days of Ethan's trip passed in an agonizing silence. Sarah clung to her phone, its screen a blank, mocking canvas. Each passing hour felt like a physical weight settling on her chest. Ethan, true to his word, should have sent a triumphant, "I'm alive and muddy" text or a call, his voice buzzing with the familiar exhilaration he always drew from the wild. But the expected check-ins never came. Monday bled into Tuesday, and the quiet from her phone became a deafening roar in her ears. She tried to rationalize it, to quell the rising tide of panic. Ethan was experienced, resourceful. Maybe a signal dead zone, a lost charger, a slight miscalculation of time. Any of these were plausible, she told herself, a mantra she repeated until the words felt hollow and meaningless. He was capable. He knew how to handle himself. Yet the mountain loomed in her mind, a silent, unblinking sentinel. By Wednesday morning, the last vestiges of rationalization had evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard knot of fear that tightened in Sarah's gut. Her hands trembling, she made the call. She spoke to a calm, professional dispatcher at the Pierce County Sheriff's Office, her own voice tight, almost unrecognizable, as she detailed the situation. She gave them his name, Ethan Miller, his age, his description, a vivid portrait painted from a sister's love. She described his car, its make and model, and most crucially, the specific trailhead where he had intended to begin his hike, a remote access point known for its challenging terrain. The dispatcher, with a practiced cadence, assured her a park ranger would be dispatched to check the parking area immediately. Hours later, the return call came, a crisp voice delivering news that was a double-edged sword. A ranger had driven the winding, gravel road to the trailhead. The parking lot was empty, save for one vehicle, Ethan's sedan, coated in a fine, powdery layer of volcanic dust and pollen, parked neatly beneath the shade of a venerable Douglas fir. The discovery confirmed her deepest fear while simultaneously offering a sliver of hope. He had arrived safely. He had entered the wilderness as planned. But it also meant that for days he had been somewhere inside that vast, unforgiving, expansive forest, and he had not emerged. The official missing person report was filed, the grim formality echoing in the silence that followed. The search was about to begin, an urgent, desperate race against time. Sarah emailed the police the most recent photo she had of her brother. It was from their last day hike together, just weeks before his ill-fated trip. In the image, Ethan was perched precariously on a jagged outcropping of volcanic rock, his face lit with a wide, genuine smile, framed by the backdrop of the misty, imposing peak of Mount Rainier. He wore his favorite bright blue hiking jacket, a vibrant orange beanie pulled low on his brown hair, and his large hiking pack was strapped securely to his back. It was a picture of pure happiness and confidence, a perfect encapsulation of the boy who was now lost. That image, meant to be a cherished memory of a joyful day, transformed instantly into a crucial tool in a desperate race against time, the haunting face of a mystery that was just beginning to unfold. For Sarah, the world, which had merely slowed before, now seemed to halt completely. Every breath felt like a monumental effort, every moment a relentless hammer striking against her soul. The silence from the mountain where her brother's vibrant presence should have been was becoming deafening. The relentless current of time, indifferent to human sorrow, flowed onward. Months blurred into years, each one a fresh layer of dust settling over Ethan Miller's file. The frantic urgency of the initial search withered, replaced by the grim statistics of unsolved disappearances. For most, Ethan became another name whispered in hushed tones, a local tragedy that faded into the background hum of daily life. But for Sarah, time didn't heal. It merely reshaped her grief, transforming it from a raw, gaping wound into a dull, chronic ache. His absence was a constant, aching void, a phantom limb that throbbed with every family gathering, every shared laugh she couldn't have with him. His room remained untouched for months, a shrine to a life abruptly paused before she, with trembling hands and a heavy heart, packed away his belongings, each item a tangible shard of memory that pierced her anew. The scent of his worn hiking boots, the familiar weight of his camera, the dog-eared pages of his favorite adventure novels all became silent, agonizing monuments to a life stolen by the wilderness. Sarah revisited every memory, every conversation, every mundane detail of that fateful May day in 2019. The casual goodbye, her half-hearted warning, the flicker of excitement in his eyes. Guilt, a cold, insidious serpent, coiled itself around her heart. Could she have pressed harder? Insisted he take a friend? They what-ifs were a relentless torture, a treadmill of regret that left her breathless and exhausted. She'd spent countless nights staring at his last photograph, the one taken against the formidable backdrop of Mount Rainier, a ghost of a smile on her face, seeing only the vibrant spirit that the mountain had seemingly consumed. The weight of not knowing, the cruel ambiguity of a disappearance without trace, was almost unbearable. Was he lost? Hurt? Worse? Her mind, a battlefield of agonizing possibilities, offered no peace. Then, in the late summer of 2023, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor rippled through the stagnant waters of Ethan's cold case. It wasn't a breakthrough, not yet, but a subtle shift in the investigative winds. News reports began to circulate, quiet at first, then growing louder, about other hikers who had vanished in Washington's vast, unforgiving wilderness, not near Rainier, but in other remote, challenging terrains. The details were unsettlingly similar. Experienced individuals, often solo, swallowed whole by the seemingly safe embrace of nature. For most, these were isolated tragedies, disconnected threads in the intricate tapestry of the wild. But in a quiet, climate-controlled office in Olympia, a seasoned investigator named Detective Kenji Tanaka, a man whose career was defined by his uncanny ability to see patterns where others saw only chaos, felt a prickle of professional unease. As the lead detective in the regional cold case unit, his job was to look for the invisible connections, the whispers in the data. He pulled up Ethan Miller's file, its digital dust disturbed after years of inactivity. On the surface, Ethan's disappearance was a textbook case of a hiker lost to the elements, a complete void, an utter lack of evidence. But as Tanaka cross-referenced it with the emerging details of these newer cases, a disturbing hypothesis began to form, a chilling premonition that sent shivers down his spine. The possibility, however remote, of a predator lurking in the wilderness transformed Ethan's vanishing from a tragic accident into something far more sinister. Could his disappearance have been an early attempt, a more successful concealment, leaving no body, no crime scene to analyze? This chilling new lens sharpened Tanaka's focus. The primary suspect that emerged from his preliminary review of the original case file, someone whose initial involvement had seemed innocuous, was Agent Bryce Caldwell. Caldwell was a National Park Service agent who had been camping in the general vicinity of Ethan's trailhead at the time of the disappearance. His presence, initially dismissed as mere coincidence, now took on a darker hue under Tanaka's scrutiny. He had been interviewed briefly during the initial search, his answers seemingly straightforward. But Tanaka's gut, honed by years of sifting through deception, hummed with a subtle discord. Caldwell's demeanor, perhaps a little too calm, a little too detached, now seemed suspicious. Was it possible that the very protector of the park was, in fact, the threat? The thought gnawed at Sarah. When Detective Tanaka first contacted her, his voice grave, explaining the re-examination and the new, horrifying theory, Her initial surge of desperate hope was quickly overshadowed by a wave of nauseating terror. Her brother, resilient and capable, lost to the elements was one thing. But her lively, adventurous Ethan, a child almost, trapped and brutalized by a monster hidden in the shadows of the very wilderness he loved? The image was a fresh hell, replacing the ambiguous agony of not knowing with a specific horrifying scenario that clawed at her mind. Her sleep, already fragmented, became a torment of vivid nightmares where she saw Ethan, not lost to a crevasse or a sudden storm, but held captive, his vibrant spirit crushed. The hope, tenuous as it was, now danced on the precipice of absolute dread, pulling her into a maelstrom of fear she never thought possible. 4 long years had passed since the wilderness had claimed Ethan Miller, 4 years of agonizing silence that had stretched Sarah's hope thin, fraying it at the edges until it was little more than a whisper. The initial frenzied search had long since become a grim memory, replaced by the heavy quiet of an unsolved mystery. Detective Tanaka's recent inquiries had stirred the dormant embers of fear, replacing the ambiguity of a natural disaster with the chilling possibility of human malice. But still, no tangible leads emerged, just the endless echoes of unanswered questions. Then, in the crisp, late autumn of 2023, as the last vibrant leaves clung desperately to the trees on the lower slopes of Mount Rainier, that profound silence was abruptly, inexplicably shattered. The sound wasn't an explosion, nor a cry for help. It was the subtle, insistent chirp of a finely tuned instrument. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a volcanologist by trade and an avid amateur geological explorer by passion, moved with a practiced grace through the rugged terrain. Her team, a small, dedicated group of fellow enthusiasts, followed her lead. Unlike casual hikers, they weren't seeking scenic vistas. Their quest was for the unseen, the hidden pulse of the earth. Their backpacks, heavier than average, bristled with an array of sensitive scientific equipment, magnetometers, gravimeters, and leading the way in Evelyn's gloved hand, a state-of-the-art electromagnetic field, EMF, detector. For most of the day, the device had behaved predictably, its digital display showing only the faint, natural hum of the Earth's magnetic field, a quiet background whisper in the vastness of the wilderness. But as they traversed a particularly steep, densely wooded slope, where ancient volcanic rock lay hidden beneath a thick carpet of damp moss and fallen needles, the EMF detector suddenly, dramatically, screamed to life. Evelyn stopped dead in her tracks, holding up a hand to signal her companions. Her eyes, usually calm and analytical, widened as they locked onto the device's screen. The digital numbers, usually hovering near 0, were climbing with alarming speed. 20, 45, then shooting past 60. A vivid red bar graph on the display flared, indicating a strong, localized magnetic field. "Whoa, hold up," Evelyn murmured, her voice laced with a mixture of scientific curiosity and genuine bewilderment. "What is that?" Her teammate, Liam, peered over her shoulder. "Power lines? Some kind of buried conduit?" "Impossible." Evelyn shook her head, already taking a slow, deliberate step to her left. The numbers on the screen plummeted. She shifted back to her right, and they shot up again, peaking at an inexplicable, rock-steady 87 milligauss. "We're miles from any infrastructure," she explained, her brow furrowed in deep concentration. "There's no power grid out here. This isn't a natural anomaly either. Those are typically much broader, diffused. This is ... incredibly precise. It's powerful within a 5-foot radius and virtually non-existent beyond it. It's like there's a giant magnet buried right beneath our feet." Driven by the sheer puzzle of it, a thrill unique to true explorers, the trio began to systematically clear the ground at the heart of the signal. They used their hands, the tips of their hiking poles, scraping away years of accumulated decay, layers of dead leaves, pine needles, and clinging undergrowth. Beneath the debris, they found it. It wasn't a gaping cave entrance, not the dramatic maw on a cliffside one might expect. Instead, it was a fissure, a dark vertical crack in the volcanic rock, barely 3 feet wide, partially obscured by a gnarled tangle of roots from an ancient upturned tree. It looked like a jagged wound in the mountainside, exhaling a cool, damp breath that carried the faint, earthy scent of subterranean depths. Evelyn held the EMF detector directly over the opening. The reading remained locked at a powerful 87. The signal was emanating directly from the profound darkness below. The mystery, now palpable and irresistible, pulsed like the very signal itself. This was precisely the kind of discovery their group lived for. After a brief, excited discussion, they decided that Liam, the most experienced climber among them, would make the initial descent. They swiftly unpacked their climbing gear, Liam clipping into a safety harness and rope, which Evelyn and their third companion, Maria, anchored securely to a massive living old-growth fir. With a powerful headlamp strapped to his helmet, Liam clicked it on, its piercing white beam cutting a searing path into the profound blackness of the fissure. He carefully, painstakingly, lowered himself into the opening. The initial descent was tight, the cold, damp rock pressing against his jacket. After about 10 feet, the fissure suddenly, dramatically, widened. Liam was no longer in a narrow crack but at the very top of a vast, silent chamber. He hung in open space, the rope his only tether to the world above. He swept his headlamp beam across the cavern, revealing glistening, wet rock walls that stretched far beyond the light's reach, disappearing into an oppressive, ancient gloom. He angled his beam downwards. It didn't find a floor. It simply disappeared into a seemingly bottomless, inky darkness. He was at the top of a massive vertical pit. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cave's cold air ran down his spine. His voice, slightly echoing, crackled over his helmet radio to the surface team. It opens into a huge cave. Sheer drop below me. As his eyes slowly adjusted, he began to scan the immediate perimeter of the pit below. And then his headlamp beam caught something. Far below him, at what he estimated to be a drop of at least 60, maybe 70 feet, was a small, almost imperceptible splash of color against the dark rock. He squinted, focusing the beam. It looked like a pile of fabric, perhaps a sleeping bag, and some other discarded material next to it. His first thought was of some old mining camp, a forgotten relic left behind decades ago. It was a fascinating find, a testament to past human presence, but it utterly failed to explain the persistent, powerful EMF signal coming from above. Liam climbed back up, his mind racing, the puzzle of the signal nagging at him. "There's gear down there," he told Evelyn and Maria as he pulled himself out of the fissure, his breath misting in the cool air. "A sleeping bag, maybe a pack, but it's at the bottom of a huge pit. There's no way the signal from my meter could be coming from that far down. It has to be up here, near the entrance." Leaving the ropes in place, a silent testament to the discovery, Evelyn began a more meticulous, almost forensic search of the fissure's immediate opening. She ran the EMF meter along every crack, every crevice, every tiny alcove in the rock face. The signal fluctuated wildly, teasing them, until she held the device near a small, dry alcove in the rock wall just inside the entrance and about chest high. The meter screamed. The number 87 locked steadfastly on the screen, a defiant beacon in the wilderness. She reached into the alcove, her fingers brushing against something cold, smooth, and distinctly rectangular, wedged tightly between two rocks. With careful precision, she worked it free and pulled it out into the muted daylight. It was a small personal two-way radio, a walkie-talkie. It was weathered and dirty, its casing scratched and grimed with years of accumulation, but remarkably, it was intact. The three explorers stood in stunned silence, looking from the unassuming radio to the dark, breathing Fisher, then back at the device in Evelyn's hand. This was no longer a mere geological curiosity. A radio, intentionally placed to broadcast a signal, paired with abandoned camping gear at the bottom of a deadly, inaccessible pit. This was something else entirely. This was a scene. It screamed of human intent, of desperation, of a story untold. With a shared, grim understanding that transcended words, Evelyn pulled out her satellite phone, a device they carried for emergencies exactly like this. Its cool plastic felt heavy in her hand as she dialed the universal lifeline 911. The silence of the mountain, the very silence that had held its secrets for so long, had finally been broken, not by a cry, but by a faint, persistent electronic hum. And for Sarah, hundreds of miles away, and for Detective Tanaka, poring over cold case files, this was the first, terrifying whisper of a potential miracle, or a new, deeper nightmare. This small, unassuming walkie-talkie, by some impossible chance, might just be the key to unlocking the truth of Ethan Miller's vanished life. The discovery of the battered walkie-talkie at the mouth of the hidden Mount Rainier fissure ignited a frantic, desperate new phase in the search for Ethan Miller. What had been a cold case, chilled by years of silence, suddenly pulsed with a fragile, terrifying heartbeat of possibility. Every minute counted now. The small, unassuming device, encased in an evidence bag, was rushed to the State Police Forensics Lab, its fate resting in the skilled hands of Sarah Jenkins, a specialist in electronics and data recovery. Her lab, usually a quiet sanctuary of wires, circuit boards, and blinking diagnostic tools, transformed into the urgent epicenter of the revitalized investigation. Detective Kenji Tanaka, his usual stoic demeanor barely concealing a whirlwind of adrenaline and suppressed hope, paced the sterile linoleum of the waiting area. He knew, with a certainty that thrummed through his very bones, that the truth held within that small piece of plastic would be the pivot point for everything. It would either confirm Ethan's tragic demise or, against all odds, scream a different story. The stakes were astronomical. Sarah, meanwhile, felt a renewed surge of agonizing anticipation. The phone call from Detective Tanaka, brief and to the point, had left her reeling. A radio. Ethan's gear. Hope, a fragile, tender thing, dared to unfurl its wings in her chest, even as a colder, more logical part of her mind braced for disappointment. In her lab, Sarah Jenkins, methodical and precise, set to work. Her initial assessment of the walkie-talkie was grim. Its casing was scratched and worn, caked with years of volcanic dust and damp earth. The battery compartment showed clear signs of corrosion, the kind that usually renders electronic devices utterly inert. She didn't expect to find much, perhaps a last faint whisper of data, a ghost in the machine. But when she connected it to a sophisticated diagnostic tool, a faint, almost imperceptible power reading flickered on the screen. The battery, against all expectations, wasn't completely dead. This was the first major anomaly, a tiny spark in the vast darkness. A standard alkaline battery left in a device for 5 years would have been completely inert, a lifeless husk. This was something else. Working with the quiet intensity of a surgeon, Sarah carefully disassembled the radio. Her fingers, accustomed to the delicate intricacies of microcircuitry, moved with practiced ease. What she found inside sent a jolt of genuine disbelief through her. These weren't the standard alkaline batteries. They were high-capacity lithium-ion cells, a more advanced and long-lasting type. And based on this specific model and, crucially, their measured level of degradation and remaining voltage, she could piece together an astonishingly precise timeline. These batteries had not been sitting dormant in that device since Ethan vanished in May 2019. Her conservative estimate, double-checked and verified by her colleagues, was that the radio had been actively powered on, broadcasting its intermittent beacon for no more than 18 months. It had most likely been placed in that rocky crevice deliberately, sometime in the spring or summer of 2023. When Detective Tanaka received Sarah Jenkins's report, he had to read it twice, then a third time, his eyes scanning each word, each technical detail, as if to find a hidden flaw. The implications were staggering, almost inconceivable. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. This wasn't the scene of a 5-year-old hiking accident. Ethan Miller, or someone with his radio, had been alive as recently as 1.5 years ago. The logical, almost comforting narrative of a tragic accident, a fall, exposure, a swift end, was obliterated, shattered into 1,000,000 impossible fragments. Ethan hadn't just fallen into a pit and perished. The very ground beneath Tanaka's feet seemed to shift, betraying every established theory. For Sarah, the news hit with the force of a physical blow, simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. When Tanaka called her, his voice devoid of its usual clinical detachment, a tremor of emotion she rarely heard, he relayed the impossible truth. Ethan's radio. Alive. Recently. Her mind reeled, trying to reconcile the image of her lost boy with the phantom of a long-term survivor. Tears, hot and unexpected, streamed down her face. Tears not of sorrow, but of a bewildering, almost painful, renewed hope. If he was alive, where was he? Why hadn't he come home? Why the silence? The new timeline didn't answer questions. It birthed 1,000 more, each more urgent and bewildering than the last. How could a teenager, lost in the unforgiving wilderness of Mount Rainier, have survived for years? And if he was alive in 2023, why was he still missing now? Why had he not made contact? Why leave a signal at a dangerous, impassable fissure instead of trying to get to safety, to a main trail, to civilization? The focus of the investigation pivoted with whiplash intensity. This was no longer a cold case recovery mission. It was an active, desperate search for a person who might still be alive, who had, by some miracle, defied the odds and the very laws of nature. The vast, silent volcanic wilderness, which had seemed to swallow Ethan whole, now appeared to be hiding something far more profound, and perhaps far more disturbing than a simple tragic fall. The initial theories of accident or even human predation from 5 years ago seemed almost quaint in comparison to the sheer, mind-boggling mystery that now unfolded before them. The truth of Ethan Miller's fate was far more complex, far more desperate, and infinitely more terrifying than anyone could have ever imagined. The impossible truth that Ethan Miller had been alive for years after his presumed disappearance sent a fresh jolt of urgency through the investigation. The focus shifted with whiplash speed from a cold case recovery to an active search for a survivor. The cold, silent witness at the heart of the mystery, the hidden cave system beneath Mount Rainier, became the new ground zero. Detective Tanaka knew that if Ethan had indeed endured, the cave itself held the story of his incredible ordeal. He authorized a full-scale, meticulous forensic sweep, not just to find a body, but to piece together the narrative of a life lived against all odds in the subterranean world. A specialized speleological team, experts in cave exploration and mapping, was immediately contracted. These weren't mere adventurers. They were highly trained professionals, equipped with laser measurement tools, advanced lighting, and even miniature drones for navigating the largest, most treacherous chambers. They arrived at the fissure, their brightly colored ropes and specialized equipment a stark contrast to the muted tones of the forest. For days they descended into the profound darkness, methodically charting every passage, every chamber, every twist and turn of the complex network of lava tubes. The initial discovery of Ethan's camping gear at the bottom of the 60-foot pit confirmed a catastrophic fall. His large frame backpack, now weathered and partially open, lay beside a faded blue sleeping bag, just as the amateur explorers had described. The scene spoke of impact, of struggle, of a desperate, terrifying beginning to an unimaginable ordeal. But the true scale of Ethan's incredible survival began to unfold as the speleological team pushed deeper. Miles from the initial pit, beyond chambers that echoed with the drip of subterranean water and passages so narrow they required squeezing through, they made their second, monumental discovery. Concealed on the surface, nearly half a mile from the known fissure, they found another entrance to the cave. This was no mere crack in the earth. It was a wide, arching opening, large enough to walk through upright, a natural doorway worn smooth by occasional animal use. A gentle, sloping floor of packed earth led down into the main cavern network. This was the paradox, a clear, relatively easy way in and out of the cave system, hidden just beneath the surface, yet utterly undiscovered during the initial desperate ground search. For Ethan, trapped and injured, finding this exit would have been a miracle. With this new knowledge, Detective Tanaka ordered an unprecedented forensic sweep of the cave. Forensic specialists, accustomed to combing through houses and outdoor crime scenes, were paired with the speleological experts. They worked under the stark, sterile glare of portable floodlights, transforming sections of the main cavern into an underground laboratory. They moved with agonizing slowness, gritting off sections of the cave floor, meticulously sifting through dust and volcanic soil that had lain undisturbed for centuries. Every pebble, every fragment was scrutinized. The first significant evidence of prolonged human habitation came from the area near the newly discovered easy walkout entrance. Tucked into a dry, sheltered alcove, partially shielded from the main cavern's damp drafts, they found it, a small, makeshift fire pit. It was little more than a crude circle of blackened stones, but the ash inside was a forensic treasure trove. Analysis revealed charcoal from multiple types of wood, all native to the surrounding Rainier forest Douglas fir, hemlock, cedar. More importantly, the layering of the ash indicated it had been used repeatedly, perhaps over a long period. This wasn't the site of a single campfire. It was a hearth, a place someone had returned to again and again for warmth, light, and most tellingly, for cooking. Near the fire pit, they found more. A scattering of tiny, brittle bones, almost lost in the fine cave dust. An expert identified them as belonging to small animals, squirrels, rabbits, even a few species of cave-dwelling birds. These weren't accidental intrusions. They were the remains of meals. Alongside the bones, they discovered several sharpened sticks. They were crude tools, their points hardened by fire, perhaps even bearing faint scorch marks, but their purpose was unmistakable. They were makeshift spears or skewers, crafted by hand for hunting and preparing food. The evidence painted a staggering, almost unbelievable picture of survival. Ethan Miller had not simply endured, he had adapted. The dominant theory, once rooted in malice, now shifted to one grounded in a desperate, ferocious fight for life. The narrative began to coalesce. Ethan, perhaps disoriented or having taken a wrong turn in the dense woods, stumbled into the unseen fissure. The 60-foot drop would have been catastrophic, but his large, well-padded hiking pack could have acted as a crude airbag, cushioning his impact just enough to save his life. He would have been severely injured, broken bones, a concussion, internal trauma, but miraculously, he was alive, trapped in the profound darkness at the bottom of the pit. In those initial hours, perhaps even days, his survival training and an indomitable will to live would have taken over. The radio, his only link to the outside world, would have been his priority. Perhaps in a moment of adrenaline-fueled desperation after the fall, he had managed to hurl it upwards, hoping it would land near the opening where its faint signal could be caught by rescuers. Or perhaps, in a feat of incredible, agonizing strength, he had managed to climb partway back up the treacherous fissure wall before his injuries overwhelmed him, wedging the device into the crevice as a final, desperate act, a silent message in a bottle before falling back into the dark depths. Trapped, in agony, and utterly alone, he would have used his sleeping bag for warmth, subsisting on whatever food he had in his pack. Weeks, perhaps even months, could have passed this way, his young body slowly, agonizingly mending in the absolute cold and dark. His flashlight would have been his most precious possession, its dwindling beam his only solace, his only hope. It was during this period of grueling recovery that he must have begun to explore, crawling or limping his way through the winding passages leading away from the bottomless pit, searching, always searching for another way out. And eventually, incredibly, he found it. The discovery of the wide, easily accessible walkout entrance must have felt like a miracle, a literal light at the end of the tunnel, a breath of fresh, life-giving air. He was no longer a prisoner of the pit. He could leave. This new theory explained everything else: the fire pit, the animal bones, the sharpened sticks. He had turned the cave from a potential tomb into a base of operations, a desperate, ingenious refuge. He had learned to hunt, to make fire without modern tools, to survive against odds that would break most adults. He had become a part of the wilderness in a way he could never have imagined, a ghost of his former self, forged by the crucible of raw survival. But this theory, as compelling and awe-inspiring as it was, also created its own agonizing paradox. If he found the easy way out, why did he never retrieve the radio? The most logical answer, horrifying in its simplicity, was also the most heartbreaking. His flashlight batteries died. Without a light source, navigating the complex, pitch-black maze of the cave, especially back to the dangerous, narrow fissure where the radio lay, would have been an impossible, suicidal risk. The radio, his last desperate cry for help, was lost to him forever in the crushing darkness. So, he walked out of the cave, leaving his old life, his old gear, and his last message behind at the bottom of the pit. He stepped back into the sunlight, a survivor, a ghost returned to the world of the living, a testament to the unyielding human spirit. But the story doesn't end there. It collides, with chilling force, with a final, terrifying question. After surviving the catastrophic fall, the debilitating injuries, and years of unimaginable isolation in the depths of Mount Rainier, what happened to him next? He never called his family. He never accessed his bank accounts. He never tried to reclaim his life. He simply walked out of one mystery and straight into another. The sinister undertone of the other missing hikers, the very cases that had briefly reopened his file, returned with chilling force. Detective Tanaka and Sarah were now haunted by a new, even more tragic possibility. Had Ethan Miller performed a miracle of survival, enduring years of unimaginable hardship to heal himself and win his freedom, only to walk out of that mountain cave and directly into the path of a human predator? Had he survived the wilderness, only to be consumed by the very world he was trying to rejoin? The chilling silence from Mount Rainier was broken, but the silence that followed Ethan's emergence was far more ominous. The revelation that Ethan Miller had defied the odds, that he had not only survived a catastrophic fall but also endured for years within the labyrinthine embrace of Mount Rainier's subterranean depths, ignited a firestorm of renewed investigative energy. Detective Tanaka, however, found himself staring into a chilling paradox. Ethan had lived, he had escaped, but he had once again vanished. The immediate frantic search around the cave's newly discovered easy exit yielded nothing. No footprints beyond a few days old, no discarded items, no sign of what happened after he stepped back into the sunlight. The investigation, now revitalized but also haunted by this new, deeper mystery, circled back to Sarah. When Detective Tanaka called, his voice now imbued with an almost frantic urgency, Sarah felt a fresh wave of hope surge through her, so potent it was almost painful. Her brother was a survivor. He was out there. But this hope was inextricably intertwined with a cold, paralyzing terror. If he'd survived the mountain, what could have happened to him after he escaped? The thought gnawed at her, a relentless internal monologue. Had he walked out of one hell only to stumble into another? She clung to every word from Tanaka, every theoretical scenario, but as weeks bled into months, the trail grew cold once more. The initial surge of public interest, fueled by the astonishing discovery of the cave and the radio, began to wane. The human element of the investigation, the relentless interviews, the recanvassing of nearby towns, had, for all its meticulous effort, failed to yield a single concrete lead. The case settled back into a grim, grinding routine, the silence returning, albeit a different, more ominous kind of quiet. Detective Tanaka, despite the lack of new evidence, refused to let the file gather dust. He kept it on his desk, a constant, nagging reminder of the boy who had cheated death only to disappear again. Sarah, too, never stopped. She posted flyers, joined online forums, a solitary, determined figure fighting against the tide of public forgetfulness. But the wilderness, vast and indifferent, held its new secret close. Then, the unexpected, the improbable, intervened. Not the sophisticated technology of law enforcement, nor the dedicated efforts of trained searchers, but the quiet, unassuming hobby of a local man. It was early February 2025. The air on Mount Rainier's lower slopes was sharp and biting, carrying the promise of late winter snow. Leonard "Lenny" Finch, a man whose life revolved around the rhythms of the forest, was making his annual rounds. Lenny wasn't a casual hiker. He was a park caretaker, a hunter, and a naturalist. For years, he'd maintained a network of strategically placed trail cameras across a vast tract of private woodland bordering the national park. These weren't for thrill-seeking. They were his silent sentinels, his way of keeping a quiet watch on the movements of deer, black bears, and the elusive cougars that shared his land. One particular camera line was exceptionally remote, set up along an old, overgrown logging path that was slowly being reclaimed by the forest, its memory card rarely checked, sometimes left for a full year between visits. Back in his dusty wood-paneled workshop, the scent of sawdust and aged timber filling the air, Lenny settled into his worn armchair, a steaming mug of black coffee in hand. This was his ritual, a quiet pleasure, reviewing the thousands of images and short video clips captured by his patient cameras. He clicked through footage, a blur of mundane wilderness life. A doe and her fawn stepping delicately through the undergrowth, their eyes wide and cautious. A shaggy black bear, immense and unhurried, rubbing its back on a favorite tree, leaving tufts of coarse fur. A raccoon, its masked eyes gleaming in the infrared, staring curiously into the lens. It was mostly routine, comforting in its predictability. He was about to swap out the card from the very last camera when he paused, his thumb hovering over the next clip button. His eyes, sharp and accustomed to discerning subtle movements in the wild, had caught something from deep within the archive, a fleeting anomaly that broke the pattern of wildlife. He rewound the clip. The timestamp in the corner of the grainy infrared footage read, August 14th, 2024, 4:52 a.m. The clip itself was only 15 seconds long, flickering in the monochrome world of night vision. It showed a figure walking down the center of the old logging path. It was unmistakably not an animal. It was a person, moving with a weary but steady and determined gait. The figure was gaunt, almost skeletal, their clothes tattered and dark against the grayscale of the night vision footage hanging loosely on their frame. Their hair was long, matted, and disheveled, obscuring much of their face. But as the person passed directly in front of the camera, they turned their heads slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if reacting to the faint, almost inaudible click of the infrared sensor activating. For a few clear, agonizing frames, the camera captured their profile. Lenny's breath caught in his throat. His coffee cup, forgotten, clattered softly against the wooden table. The facial structure, even in the grainy infrared, was unmistakable. The high cheekbones, the defined jawline, the subtle curve of the brow. Despite the hardship etched onto her features, despite the emaciation and the wildness of her appearance, it was Ethan Miller. He was alive. He was on his feet. And he was walking with a clear, unwavering purpose. Lenny stared at the screen, his mind reeling. He had followed the news of the cave discovery months earlier, the local buzz about the missing teenager and the mysterious radio. Everyone in the region had. He knew that face, even aged by 5 years of unimaginable hardship. He watched the clip again, then a third time, his heart hammering against his ribs. The woman in the video was alive. She had survived. And she had walked out of that mountain. His hand, shaking slightly, reached for his landline phone, a direct, deliberate action. He immediately called the sheriff's department. The long silence had been broken, not by a search party, not by a detective's theory, but by a ghost caught on film. The grainy, monochrome image captured by Lenny Finch's trail camera was more than just a photograph. It was a ghost given form, a chilling, irrefutable testament to an extraordinary survival. Ethan Miller, gaunt and wild, emerging from the dense wilderness of Mount Rainier in April 2024. This was the definitive climax of a 5-year ordeal, proof that a young man had defied death in a way few could fathom. He was alive. He had walked out. The location of the camera provided the final, agonizing piece of the geographical puzzle. It was positioned on an old logging path, nearly 10 miles from the cave's secret exit. A 10-mile journey through thick, unforgiving woods for someone in his emaciated condition would have been an epic feat of endurance, a testament to an almost superhuman will to live. More critically, that forgotten path, as Detective Tanaka discovered from worn topographical maps, eventually intersected with a paved state highway a mere 5 miles further on from the camera's location. Salvation, civilization. It was so close, tantalizingly within reach. When Detective Tanaka viewed the footage in his office, the dimly lit room felt suddenly cold. His usual stoicism fractured, replaced by a profound awe that quickly morphed into dread. The boy who had vanished so completely, the subject of a case he'd almost resigned himself to forever classifying as unsolved wilderness accident, was right there, captured on film, walking with a clear, determined purpose. The date on the footage, April 2024, fit perfectly with the forensic timeline of the radio's battery life. This was the ghost, tangible and real. This was the end of his trail in the wilderness. But then, what happened next? The implications were a heavy weight in the air. Sarah's reaction was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. When Tanaka showed her the image, her hands trembled, grasping the tablet as if it might disappear. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, streamed down her face, blurring the haunting silhouette of her brother. He was alive. He had survived. The miracle she had barely dared to dream of for years had actually come true. But the elation was quickly, chillingly, overshadowed by the realization that if he was alive then, where was he now? Why hadn't he come home? Why hadn't he called? Her heart, which had just soared, plummeted, sinking under the weight of this new, unfathomable uncertainty. The joy of knowing he had endured was now poisoned by the dread of his second, even more terrifying disappearance. A renewed, massive public appeal was launched with unprecedented urgency. This time, the call to action was backed by the chillingly real image from the trail camera. Flyers, bearing the grainy, spectral profile of a survivor, were plastered on every gas station, truck stop, and diner along that stretch of highway leading out of the Rainier area. News channels, captivated by the story of miraculous survival, broadcast the image relentlessly, urging anyone, anywhere, who might have seen this young man to come forward. Investigators flooded the area, knocking on every door within a 20-mile radius, interviewing every resident, every business owner, every passing trucker. They showed the photo, now digitally enhanced to sharpen the details of his haggard face, to countless faces, recounting the extraordinary tale of his endurance. Did you see him? This boy. He walked out of the wilderness in April of last year. Did you pick up a hitchhiker? See anyone wandering the shoulder of the road, looking like this? But the result was always the same: a shake of the head, a furrowed brow of genuine confusion, a distant, vague memory of something that couldn't be definitively linked to Ethan. No one remembered seeing him. No long-haul trucker recalled a gaunt, disheveled young man walking alone on the shoulder of that lonely highway in the pre-dawn hours of an April morning. No diner waitress, wiping down counters, remembered serving a meal to someone so clearly marked by a struggle for survival. No one reported picking up a hitchhiker who matched his description. The collective memory of the area remained stubbornly blank, a vast, terrifying void. The trail of Ethan Miller ended abruptly, chillingly, precisely there, on the shoulder of a remote state highway, at the very boundary between the untamed ancient wilderness and the fleeting, often indifferent, world of human civilization. The trail camera footage was the last known, verified proof of Ethan Miller's existence. After that, nothing. A vacuum. The case, for all its astonishing twists and turns, remained suspended in an agony of possibilities. The most optimistic theory, one that Sarah desperately clings to despite its fragility, is that he was indeed picked up by someone, a kind stranger, a passing motorist, and for reasons known only to him, chose to disappear into a new life. Perhaps the trauma of his ordeal was so profound that he felt compelled to shed his old identity, to escape the memories and the expectations, to forge a new path free from the ghost of Mount Rainier. But Detective Tanaka, hardened by years of confronting the grim realities of human nature, finds that scenario hard to accept. A young man who fought so fiercely to survive, who endured years of unimaginable hardship to return to the world, would not, he argues, so easily abandon the family who had never given up on him, the sister who had kept his memory alive through 5 long years of desolate grief. The bond, the sheer will to survive and return, seems too strong to simply evaporate. The more prevalent and far darker theory is the one that has haunted the case from the beginning, a cold dread that tightens around Sarah's heart with every passing silent day. It is the chilling possibility that Ethan Miller, after defying death in the depths of Mount Rainier, after enduring the unspeakable isolation and darkness of the lava tubes, after embarking on a miraculous journey back to the world, after walking those final, arduous miles to the very edge of human civilization, emerged from the forest only to encounter the one predator more dangerous than any in the wild. That he survived the crushing indifference of nature, the brutal force of a fall, the agonizing slow recovery in the dark, only to be consumed by the very world he was desperately trying to rejoin. His story, a testament to human resilience, ends not with a triumphant homecoming, but on the shoulder of a lonely highway, swallowed by a final, terrible silence. A silence that the towering, ancient slopes of Mount Rainier can no longer be blamed for keeping. His fate, forever unknown, is a haunting echo in the vast, indifferent landscape. We want to hear your opinion about this thrilling story. What do you think happened with this teenager? Tell us your name, where you are watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the new stories coming up. See you next time.